Hey, y'all, welcome back to Right at the Wire. Well, Keeneland starts its fall meet on Friday, and with it, they've got a late pick five sequence with some 2-year-old stakes in it that'll definitely have some Breeders' Cup implications. So let's get into it. So the Keeneland pick five on Friday, October 6th, comprises races 6 through 10. And we got a real tough one to start off. It's a maiden special weight for 100,000 in leg one, race 6. It's run at 6 furlongs for 2-year-old fillies, and it's awful hard to throw out a lot of these. There's a lot of first-time starters in here. Um, from the also eligibles, if makeup number 14 draws in, I think he'd be a strong favorite to win this race. He lost to Regal Rumor last time, who went on to run in a stakes race next out. But he was on the engine early, broke very sharply, and kept on really well. And I think this is a horse that can build off of that. You never overlook Steve Asmussen, and I think this one's logical as a win candidate. You've got some first-time starters in here, most notably Bourbon Breeze. He's trained by Raleigh Mott, and he's by Omaha Beach, who's just an electric sire with first-time starters. Got a great tab, a lot of bullets, looks awful good, looks ready to run. I think you have to include him. Carolina Candy is by Twirling Candy, and they are always really sharp out of the gate first time. And I really like Twirling Candies as first-time starters. This one's got a solid tab. Looks like she's a runner, too. I think you got to include. Pinup Betty had her first start. She was wide pretty much throughout, but kept on pretty well, and looked to have look like one that will get better in the second start, particularly with a better post. And I think she's got that here. So I think this is one that you have to include with the second start. Easy Street, Mark Cassie's not known for first-time starters necessarily, but this one looks pretty well meant for this race, and I think it's one that's definitely worth considering. Burlane is trained by Brad Cox, and you got Florent Giroux aboard, I believe, or Flavian Pratt, one of his A riders. I'm sorry, it escapes me right now, but looks well meant, good, solid tab, and Brad Cox with first-time starters is very solid, so you can't overlook there. Plain Champagne, trained by Tom Amos. First start was showed a really solid close late. Was a little slow to get going, but showed the kind of kick late that tells you in the second start being a little more forwardly placed could be a factor here. Kind of the wild card is Tammy Lynn, number 9. She is coming off turf and lost to an audible filly who just displayed a name escapes me. I think it was like an audible, who had monster kick in the stretch, just blew by the field. But Tammy Lynn kept on really well too, and moving to dirt shouldn't be an issue as she's by Distorted Humor, and so I think if she can transfer that form to dirt, she might be pretty tough in here. Leg 2 is race 7, the Phoenix Stakes. It's a grade 2, run at 6 furlongs for 3-year-olds and up. And this is a kind of interesting race in that there's some horses who are probably going to be favored or be in the mix that aren't necessarily in the greatest of form. So it's a kind of an interesting race from that perspective. From the ease, Dr. Oscar, I think, is coming in the best form. He generally runs his better races at class levels a little lower than this, but he is 4 years old, comes off a win in a nice, in a decent race with one of his career high efforts. So you'd have to believe he'll be in this race in good form. I think he's got a little more top end than Top Gunner does, and perhaps will be able to get on the engine and sustain it. It's got a chance. You're probably going to get a price, too. Sibelius is a bit of a wild card because since coming back from Dubai, he really hasn't run terribly well. But I have to believe he'll round back into form. You have to believe they're gearing him up for the Breeders' Cup. He's got a little better each time since coming back from Dubai, and I'll expect him to run a solid race here. He's going to be a tough matchup against Bango, but I think if this one rounds back into to prior form, that he would definitely be hard to beat here. Bango is pretty obvious. This isn't Churchill Downs, though. Let's note that. where he's a monster. But this is still a really nice horse. And he doesn't quite have the track advantage that he does at Churchill, but he's in good form. There's no reason to keep him off, and he's a logical win candidate. Gulfstream Way, Norm Cassie is just having a ridiculously good year, and he's got his A-list jockey, Rafael Santana, aboard. They're winning at 47%. Awful hard to overlook him. I'm not sure he has the top end to win this race, but he has been getting progressively better over the course of his career. And if the pace gets a little hot, then he probably will have first jump and has a chance to take this one down. The wild card is Nakatomi. This is an underachieving horse. He loves Keeneland. He does very well there, and it's hard to. You certainly can't overlook Wesley Ward trainees at Keeneland. But this one just he never seems to get there. And his last win was his last race at Saratoga, but was an optional claimer. And it's just kind of hard to trust his form. But at Keeneland, I think perhaps it might pick him up a little bit. I'd love to see him at 7 furlongs where he's a monster. But I think he's capable of winning this race. Didn't include him, but Necker Island is one to kind of think about coming off the pace a little bit. But he never seems to get there either, and I don't think he's a logical win candidate. And just a note on the closers, Manny was probably the best of them, but he's another one. I don't think he's what he used to be, and I'm not quite certain he's going to get the type of scenario that's favorable to him here. Leg 3 is race 8. It's the Jessamine Stakes. It's a grade 2 run at a mile and a 16th on the turf, I should say. Sorry about that. For 2-year-old fillies. And as always with the 2-year-olds, it's a tough one to gauge because any one of them can pop at any time. But we've distilled this field of 11 down to what I consider to be a pretty good top 5. Tupi from the E group. Looks like she can rate as well as get on the lead. Last start was a pretty good second, and Graham Motion is 22% with a first-time route. This one's coming in, I think, in pretty good form. And of the ones on the one of the E group, I think this one probably stands the best chance to factor in this race. From the EP group, number 9, Appellate, is trained by Todd Pletcher. Had a pretty promising first race. Next one, the field wasn't the greatest necessarily, but hung in there pretty well. Was a pretty decent second. And from the first race, I think there's some promise there. And, of course, Todd Pletcher and Rod Ortiz. Todd Pletcher, not always the greatest at Keeneland, but I think this one can move forward, particularly getting around 2 turns. So we'll use Appellate. Buku, I think, should be the likely favorite. The last race just drew away from the field at Churchill Downs pretty impressively, was very professional, and I think that one is, she's a logical win candidate, and I think probably the best in this field. Time to Dazzle's coming down from Canada. It was a bit of a wild card, but ran what I thought was a very professional race and drew off from the field pretty impressively. Not necessarily the greatest of fields, but I think showed something there, and that I think the move up in class here isn't going to be too big of a deal. So Mark Cassie, I think, might have a pretty good one there. And then from the last from the P group, Crown Imperial ran a really nice race last time. Was very impressive. And I think showing the class should be able to, looks ready to move forward as well. And as always with the 2-year-olds, as well as with the 3-year-olds, we're looking for that potential to move forward. And I think from this group, this 5 represents the ones that are most likely to move forward. Leg 4 is the 9th race. It's the Darley Alcibiades. It's a grade 2 run at a mile and a 16th for 2-year-old fillies. And this is, for many of these, it's the first time around 2 turns. And I think that's the determining factor. If we look, Bright Work obviously stands out. Has been getting better. as the distances have been getting longer. Awfully classy. Put away ways and means in the spin away very impressively. Uh, Outwork is not necessarily the greatest two-turn sire. His average winning distance is 6.5 furlongs. So I think that's really the only question that I have about Brightwork. But she is awfully classy, and sometimes that can make up for any shortcomings distance-wise. Have to be the pick in this race to win it. But there are some worthy challengers, most notably Vivi's Dream. I'd have to, who Brightwork has beaten. But Vivi's Dream is another one that keeps getting better with every race, and I think is going to give Brightwork all she can handle. And, again, the two-turn thing maybe is a little better suited for it, but Brightwork probably the best of the group. Emery is another one. Hasn't run since breaking the maiden at Saratoga, but did so pretty impressively. And Brad Cox is not to be overlooked at Keeneland, and he's really good with the first route. And just the way this one drew off, you thought, I did anyway, that there was plenty left in the tank. So I don't think two turns is going to be an issue. So Emery will be probably going to give Brightwork all she can handle as well. Alpine Princess will be coming from off the pace. And what I noted more than anything is that she had to go 8 wide in her last race to get up at the wire. And, showed a lot of grit in doing so. I mean, that's not easy to do. Had to run probably about twice as long as the race was in order to get the win. But she did get it. And I think that that showed me enough to think that maybe this one can factor as well. Same thing with Candide. What I really liked about Candide was she had to come from about 6 wide, and it was really the burst of acceleration that she had in the stretch. And she had to tackle what was looking like a runaway winner, and she just kept grinding away, and again had a big burst at the turn, and got up in time. So coming from off the pace, sometimes in these races, that's a really good place to be with 2-year-olds, because a lot of them are going to be keyed up and firing on the front end. So Candide, I kind of think is a sleeper in this race, but it's going to be a really good rendition of the Alcibiades. This is a deep field for sure. The final leg of the Pick 5 is race 10, and it's an allowance for 120,000 non-winners of 3 lifetime, and it's run on the turf at a mile for 3-year-olds and up. And this is a big field, as you can see, and it's what I think it's going to come down to is what was the best last race. You've got 3 horses in particular who all came out of the last race at Kentucky Downs, which is a very hotly contested 7-furlong race, and it appears to be the class of the other competitors. So I think it'll more than likely boil down to Underdressed, number 2, Chasing the Crown, number 9, or the winner of the last race, Boyce, number 5. And in particular, Boyce, we saw at Saratoga, and we liked him as a long shot, and he just missed. But I thought the nice part of it was he dropped back to 7 furlongs, got closer to the pace than he had in his previous effort. So I think that shows maybe some improvement and some growth. So Boyce would be a logical horse to win this one again. A couple others to think about. No One to Blame has been knocking on the door since he's graduated up to the N2X class, but he hasn't been running in races as competitive or as at the same class level as the 3 I just mentioned. So he's kind of a cut below a little bit right now, I'd say, but stranger things have happened, and he's one to consider for sure. You probably get a pretty good price. And then Golden Alchemist is trained by Chad Brown. You get a Rad Ortiz. He's coming in second off the layoff, and he's logical to improve, although I will say I wasn't that keen on his last race. I would have liked to have seen him done a little better, but you can't deny those connections. And I think he's one that's logical to use. And then from the also eligibles, Dracon. I love this horse because I got him at a monster price at Saratoga in the last race, and he's definitely been in really good form of late. The only question I have is he just ran his career high figure, Brisnet figure in the last race, and it was significantly higher than he had run before. So a lot of times when that happens, you will get a bounce, and so that gives me a little bit of concern. But of the also eligibles, I'd have to consider him the best of them to think about. So if there's a scratch or whatnot, and he draws in, I think maybe you give him another look. But this is a pretty widely contested field, and but I think one of those three is probably the most logical to win this race. So here's what our ticket's going to look like for the Keeneland Late Pick 5. In leg 1, we're going to use 2, 3, 9, and 12. It's a maiden race. I think you got a spread there. And definitely want to use the 14 if, in fact, she draws in. I think that's a really logical, looks awful good. In leg 2, race 7, we're going to use 3, 4, and 7. In leg 3, race 8, we're going to use 2, 4, and 10. And then in leg 4, in the Alcibiades, we're going to single Bright Work and just kind of hope we can get him over the line, get her over the line. It's, as you can see, these are pretty tightly contested races, and so we've got to find a most logical single somewhere. And I think you don't go any further than Bright Work, because she's awful classy, awful good, and I think she can take this one down. Though that is a very competitive race, and I think it's kind of risky, but we're just going to go for it and see what happens. And then finally in race 10, we're going to use 2, 5, 9, 10, and if Dracon draws in, the 13, and I'll leave it up to you to mix and match which one to take out. If I had to keep horses and add Dracon, I would probably use Underdressed, Boyce, and Chasing the Crown, and No One to Blame. I might, or Golden Alchemist. Maybe I'd probably lean against keeping, unless you want to get really bold and use them all. But that's obviously going to drive up the price of your ticket. So we want to keep it economical. There's a lot of ways to go in all these races, so it's $72. I think that gives us a pretty good shot, and with a little luck, we can take it down. So that's the first late pick 5 sequence at Keeneland for the fall meet, and it's a dilly for sure. There's a lot of ways to go in all those races, and we're going to hope that Bright Work doesn't let us down. I think she's awful classy, and if we have to single, I think that's a pretty good option for us. But that is a very competitive race, and they all are. So it's a tough sequence, and I just hope our analysis helps you with your own wagering strategy, and I wish you the best of luck. I think we're going to need it for that one, to be sure. I think it was pretty clear that there's a lot of ways to go in it. We will continue with our postings. The Big A at Aqueduct, Belmont at Aqueduct, whatever they're calling it now, has got a nice set of races this weekend, so we'll be covering that as well. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll have additional postings as they become apparent later on this week. So that does it for now. I'll talk to you in the very near future, and until then, be well.